Hi, and welcome to Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and in this show, we interview the movers and shakers in the world of property development and real estate. Now, this show is brought to you by a PropTech solution that's quietly saving developers a fortune and making 3D models look ancient. It's not mainstream yet, and that's exactly why it works. If you want the inside track, connect with me on LinkedIn at Glen Palmer Secure or check out the show notes below. So today I'm joined by George Murray. Now, he is the founder of Worthington Construction Managers, a pre-construction specialist who helps owners and contractors reduce uncertainty early and keep really complex projects calm, clear, and on track through stakeholder alignment. George, thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come and be on the show. It's a pleasure having you on. So firstly, welcome, and let's dive in, shall we?
Well, Glenn, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
You are more than welcome. So let's get into the first question. First question I ask absolutely every single one of my guests. If time travel became a reality and you had a chance to go back in time to when you first started your career, what advice would the person you are now tell your younger self?
Well, that's a very interesting question.
So I like it.
Yeah, I guess it presumes I'm a little wiser now than I was then. I think that, when I first started, I believed that hard work, applying yourself thoroughly, got you, to the good places you wanted to be. And I still believe that. I think my advice to myself or to anyone really would be pick something where you think that you can add value, something that you enjoy or at least that you're interested in, and really concentrate on getting good at that. And this has been my advice to, as opposed to just being a generalist, because when you focus on getting good at something, whatever that is, you're really trying to develop an expertise, and so you're focused. You're required to concentrate and look at the details of what makes someone an expert. And in my opinion, that always comes down to being aware of what decisions are important and when they become important.
Mm.
And it's not always obvious, when you're at the beginning of your career. You think, well, decisions are made by important people, and so that's what makes them important. And what I've come to realize is that decisions made early on are what really shape the whole downstream process. I think that would be my advice.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that struck me there is, finding something that you enjoy. A lot of people out there go into jobs that they don't really enjoy, and it becomes a slog for them. And, my dad always used to say is if you find something that you're passionate and that you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. So, yeah, true words. Yeah, really appreciate your output and your candor there. So, George, after 30 plus years in construction, which is a very long time, what finally pushed you to launch Worthington and focus so heavily on the pre-construction phase? And why, in your opinion, is the pre-construction phase so important?
Yeah. So Worthington Construction Managers, I actually started in 2010. And at the time, the emphasis was on owner representation. And I mean, quite frankly, the reason I started then was because of the recession in 2008. I had been laid off in 2008. I was laid off again in 2010, and I was doing, having some really successful projects. And it became frustrating that, well, to rely on one means of income, it became clear to me that I wanted to have a little more control, and sat down and had a talk with myself and said, well, okay, industry seems to be failing me. I need to do something where I'm driving, for better or worse.
Yeah.
In working with owners, and I was lucky, I picked up a decent sized municipal client at the time, and so began focusing on that type of work, government work, representing them as their owner's representative, which meant that I was simultaneously looking at what their situation was, but also trying to explain to them, well, here's what an owner's representative does. And in particular, trying to put an emphasis on the upstream, the beginning of the project. So understanding how the contract documents are developed, how these teams work together, and what different forms of contracts, what different forms of bidding, of hiring general contractors, made sense for their situation.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned this my early days being a consultant is that you can give a client what you think is the best information. Sometimes they accept it, sometimes they don't. Often they don't, and they stumble into a mistake, which you had previously explained to them. This is what we don't want. And you never say, well, I told you what was going to happen. It's no, you have to be the calming voice that brings everything back to the original premise, the original question. Okay, well, what were we trying to accomplish here? So now here's where we are, and here's what we need to do to get back. So it was a very interesting process of learning how to do consulting, how to represent, really being a presence for the client, for the owner. And I found that's what they valued.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily your expertise. This was kind of assumed that you had an expertise, but they wanted a reassuring voice in the room.
Yeah. And obviously you were there to provide that, to provide that voice. So you talk a lot about uncertainty being the biggest project risk. So where do you see it creeping up the most often? And that is before a shovel even hits the ground. So where are them risks?
Yeah. So a lot of my career has been in estimating and pre-construction organization. And what I've seen is that the handoff, but estimating is its own lane, is its own alley. And then project administration, equally important, but somewhat different. The handoff between estimating and project management, that's where I see a lot of uncertainty. And when you're estimating, you're taking incomplete information, you're building a model around the construction documents, the model, a financial model, a scheduling model. You're populating it with a lot of assumptions. Hopefully they're informed assumptions based on experience, or, it may just be quantity takeoffs populated with unit pricing or whatever. But, you're creating a model. And then as the information comes in from subcontractors, from vendors, maybe some of your, information from your own field, and you sort of take away from that model what's unnecessary. I think that's the conservative way to do it.
Yeah.
Build the model and then take away what you don't need. I've seen it done the other way, where people wait and then they're adding pieces and hoping that they got all the pieces. Very risky way to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that process of estimating leads you to your final bid, your tender. And assuming you win or you negotiate a contract, then there's a handoff to project management. Too often, I see that pre-construction process, that handoff, as like, okay, good, we're done with that. Now we can move on to really building the job. We can get the shovels in the ground. So in my view, and this is what I try to promote, the uncertainty is not necessarily a lack of information. It's assumptions that are everyone brings assumptions. Everyone sees the document, so they see the end result. They have assumptions about what the scope is, or how we're going to work together, or what the schedule is.
Yeah.
The uncertainty is unexamined assumptions. unexamined assumptions, and the hardest ones are where you and I both agree. We think we understand it. We have a certain set of assumptions. So being able to step back and say, okay, well, is this really a reasonable thing to expect? Because all of us assume that we're rational within our own frames. And for the most part, we are. We may even be experts within our own frames. But where a project comes together, at least the best projects I've seen, is where people have up front really agreed on, okay, this is what we're going to do, and here's what's in the contract, what we're going to come back to if there's something unexpected, if there's something, a disagreement, for example. So I mean, that's where I see the uncertainty is it's at that point of handoff between estimating and
Yeah.
project administration.
Yeah, that's when things can go a little bit awry. So you work with both owners and GCs. What do you see each side consistently underestimated during pre-construction? And how do you actually help them see the wood from the trees?
Yeah, interesting. So usually, or at least what I've seen, is that both parties are, they're acting rationally from within their own framework.
Yeah,
But they don't necessarily take time to put themselves in someone else's shoes. They see, well, this person serves this function, so they should just know what I want from them. I think owners often underestimate how decisions early on constrain everything that follows.
yeah,
They have a plan, they know where they want to wind up, and they've set forth, certain decisions. I think, just to put it as succinctly as possible, each side is optimizing for how they see the situation, and they're not necessarily seeing it from the other person's perspective. In business, they might say, well, I've hired you to do the job, or, you're paying me to do a certain job. But I think that again, assumptions that each side believes that they're a rational actor within the world the way they see it.
yeah. So how do you get them to communicate between the owners and the GCs?
Well, again, I think it's breaking it down to that original model that brought you to the table in the first place. You have to agree this is the entirety of the contract documents. Here's the deliverables. Do we agree on what the deliverables are? Do we agree on the time frame? And really start from there.
Yeah,
Just a fundamental basis. Are we looking at this the same way? Are we in agreement what the deliverables are and when they're due?
yeah. And with nowadays, with tighter margins and faster timelines, how do you see pre-construction evolving over the next few years, especially around the decision-making speed?
Yeah. So I think it I don't think the fundamentals of decision making are necessarily going to change. A a construction manager, as they gain experience, it really comes more and more to the fundamentals of what are we doing? How are we looking at this? How are we breaking it down? There's the idea that doing something faster is momentum is necessarily a good thing. It's necessary sometimes. The way I'm approaching it, and this is something that has really kind of revitalized my view of consulting,
Hmm.
is I've been training my AI assistant for about 2 years. And what that means is I never rely on AI to make a decision. I don't think people should rely on AI to make decisions. it's an interesting tool because it's extremely fast at recognizing patterns and because it can learn. Well, what is it learning? In my case, it's a very iterative exchange where I'm explaining. I ask a question and I look at the answer, and does the answer match what I expected to see? To the extent that it doesn't, I go back and I will explain, tweak the question, and even say, well, here's an answer that I expected. Why is your answer different?
Mm.
How did you come to that? How did you come to that? Explain to me how you came to that. And so the point there is to teach it how I think and how I write and how I look at problems. I'm talking about specific problems.
Yeah.
So, I think that to your question, how do I see pre-construction changing? The availability to process information the tools are there, but we have to learn, all of us, how to use that best for our own style of decision making, how to support our own decision making.
Yeah. I mean, AI is extremely, extremely powerful, but yeah, I double check everything I do with AI. And
Absolutely.
I think AI is wonderful. I think it's an extension of who we are, but really don't think we should be relying on AI heavily to do all the decision making process, and especially the important decisions. That should still be a human. Yes, we can take AI and we can take what it has given us, but I think at the end of the day, we need to make our own decisions. Yeah, AI
Absolutely.
is wonderful, but it does have its limitations. And, and
It
and
absolutely does.
speaking about AI, so do you think immersive tools like, the 3D environments, digital project walkthroughs, do you think that they can help owners and teams align faster on scope, sequencing, and intent before any costly decisions are locked in?
Well, I do. And, I've seen, so my background, before I even went to college, I was a draftsman, just physical paper and a lead holder.
Yeah.
And so, sat at the desk for hours and drew blueprints. And that's really how I got into construction in the first place, because I understood I could read blueprints. Many people don't really have that mm, natural sense of looking at something in, two dimensions and imagining walking through, or what is the actual scale of this? I see the numbers, but I don't know, what does that mean in terms of, the size of the room I'm going to be in. And I mean, I think it's got 3D modeling. It's great in that sense. It helps
Hmm.
people to visualize. Things like BIM can be very, very helpful. I've seen it particularly on just like complex piping projects and things like that, which it's really hard even for an engineer to understand. Okay, well, the radii of these particular pipes is this, and then as the pipe changes, it's this, and so that you know, yeah, I think it's only going to become more important and more useful. Again, any of these tools that we use, the the real power in human decision making is the ability of our minds to conceptualize what might be in the future, and is that a desirable outcome. And so, I mean, that's how I see these kinds of tools:
Yeah.
3D modeling, AI. They're tools. They're
Yeah.
tools that help us build models of what we think is going to happen, and then we examine it and we say, okay, well, yeah, that's our weight. No, that's not quite.
Yeah. And like I say, it's an extension to our creativity and our thought processes and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
George, thank you very much. That's it for today's show. Really pleasure chatting with you today. Enjoyed our conversation, learning how important pre-construction phase is, and not just aligning with the internal stakeholders, but talking about problems before the shovel hits the dirt. It's always important. And as always, a massive thanks to my listeners and for those of you watching on YouTube. George, if anyone wants to get in contact with you and learn about what you do at Worthington Construction Managers, what are the best ways for my listeners or viewers to do that?
Oh, well, yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you very much for having me on. The best way to contact me is Worthington Construction Managers, all three words jammed together, no space.com.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. And that's it for today. And remember, this show was supported by a new prop tech tool that is redefining what visualization actually means in property. The ones that are using it right now are pulling ahead. If you are eager to find out more, you know where to find me. Thanks for tuning in to Blueprints to Buildings. I'm your host, Glen Palmer. Today, I was joined by George Murray, and I will see you in the next episode.